How you doing, everyone? Welcome back to NRL Fantasy Analysis. We're going to be going through our last four teams in this review process here, going through the Storm, Panthers, South, and also the Warriors here, and a bunch of different options that are very interesting that we're going to cover in these ones. And by all means, I haven't gone through everyone, guys, so just if you're commenting in there, just saying, oh, hey, what about this guy? What about this guy? I will cover everyone for each team as we go along. I just want to, talk about a few guys that are going to help, create some guns, or a bit of a pattern of the real solid guns in your side, and then also mixing in some of the cheaper guys and the mid ranges as well, so you can sort of play around with your teams now and get a gauge of who some of the guys might be that you'd be interested in picking up. So to start with, we've got Harry Grant from the Storm, and at that price point at 697k, I don't see much downside in terms of the price point. I can see him averaging getting up to closer to 750 to 800k. Averaging in those 60s, and you see what he did at the Tigers in a team that wasn't that great. He now is obviously back with the Storm last year, split some of the minutes with Brandon Smith, the Cheese, and still managed to score really well and get to that 697 price point. The question this year, does he play 80 minutes? And I think that he should be pretty well playing 80 minutes. In terms of the Storm's forward pack, that's been reduced with with Nelson moving on and losing a couple other another guy in Finucane, for example. It leaves a few minutes in that middle, and I'd imagine Brandon Smith is going to play the majority of those minutes through the middle, and that might be split across Christian Welch and other guys in there as well. But that's something to think about with Grant. The main issue for me is that he's out first game, and do you want to hold someone first round when we know how important that first 1 to 3 rounds is in terms of getting a really good start, building some cash and getting good scores? So do you hold Grant for that first week? And I was thinking actually about starting with him until obviously, a while ago found out that news. So something to think about with Grant. And you're obviously going to lose him over Origin as well if he's playing, and well, he should be playing, and then injuries would mean he's not playing either. So there's that there. Let's go to Xavier Coats, and the big one for me is obviously the cheap price point and moving from the Broncos, who weren't a great team, especially until the last few rounds, to the Storm. So he should be a little bit undervalued just based off that, right? You'd imagine the try scoring will increase, and you can see what's happened with guys like Vunivalu and Addo-Carr, Korobidi, these types of guys. They've always been solid scorers in fantasy, but they're not people that are going to make too much money, and they're also not going to be a guy that's going to be a keeper for you. So that's what I think with Xavier. I'd expect him to sit somewhere around the 450k mark, so maybe 120k undervalued. And if he manages to start slowly, then I don't see... it's probably a bit annoying, and there's going to be some other better options. Maybe in the centers that you could play as like a center wing fullback duel that we've spoken about. Guys like Penasini, the Isaac Tagos, Stephen Crichton, these types of guys in good teams as well that should be able to do pretty well. Xavier's never really been fantasy relevant. That's kind of the real worry here, is how he's going to go in a side when he's not someone that is really big like in terms of his work rate. If you look at, there's a lot of games here under 100 meters, and then he's got the odd games where he's run the length of the field. He's got 265 for one, and then a few games there around that 150, 171, 152. So there's some decent games in and around that. But the games where he's scoring really big scores, he's scoring doubles, right? Most of the times he scores one tries. Even a game, first game last year, he scored a double and ran for 58 meters and made 2 tackles, right? He's got a double with a line break and got 21. He's got a try the next week and got 28. So there's going to be a lot of games for the Storm where he just scores that. He gets a try, picks up a few meters here or there, the odd tackle break, the odd kick defusal, and scores 30. And then he'll have the games where he gets the doubles. But he's going to have games where he doesn't score, obviously. And you can see there's 80-minute games for 6, 80-minute games for 12, 18, 8, 6, right? 10, 24, 19. We can go through the list, all his whole, a couple of years there. And there's so many scores around that 18 to 25 range. So that's something to think about with Coates, that he could come out, and if he scores sort of 10 tries in the first 7 or 8 games, then you're probably going to make some money off him. But if he happens to score at like a 70 or 80% try rate, then I don't see him making a lot of money. So that's just something to think about with Xavier there. Right, onto the Panthers side of things. And we look at someone like Liam Martin. And what we see this year is he should be getting a few more minutes, right, with Capewell moving to the Broncos. But will that create enough value for him to become a keeper? That's really what you need to be thinking about with guys in this mid-range. That 499k, you want him to at least become a 650k to 700k player and be a gun that you hold for the rest of the year. I don't see that with Martin. His work rate isn't incredible. He did actually, average pretty good minutes last year, which, shows you that even with his slight increase, he's going to have to increase his try rate or something like that to be really relevant there. You look at the bunch of the games, 51 minutes off the bench, he's got a 36 and a 27, 26 and a 52-minute effort, 35, 55 with a try, and 56 with a try, right? One really high work rate game with 5 tackle breaks and a couple of offloads. He's got an 8-minute game for 30 there, 38 and 44 when he started. So there's a lot of games in that mid-range there. And when he's got a break even or priced at 40, what you're looking for him to be is a 50-point scorer. And I just don't see it happening on a regular basis. He's not someone that has a really high tackle rate. His meters gained is usually pretty fine when he plays, anywhere around that 50 minutes plus. He gets close to 100 meters and above. But if you're looking overall at his scores, there's not enough games that are over that 60 mark. Like, he has a bunch of games over 50, but then a lot in the low 30s and low 40s. And I just don't see the value in Liam Martin compared to a few other guys that are a bit more, let's say, fantasy relevant in terms of their stat making. We look at someone like Kurt Mann, who is a good decent chance of getting some good minutes through the middle and maybe spelling at hooker for Chris Randall if that comes about. Who's 20 to 30k less, should have some dual position, and has pedigree of scoring in the mid 50s with time in the middle. So for Martin, yes, he should play some decent minutes. Will he play 80? I don't think he does. If he does consistently, then there's a bit of value, but not enough, I don't think, to warrant selection. But if you like him, he's not going to be the worst choice. I don't think you're going to lose money on him, let's say that. All right, we look at someone like Dylan Edwards at 496k. Injury concern for him is very real. We've seen a bunch of years now where he's done really well, and he's been that guy that averages over 50 or around that 50 mark, and then he happens to get injured, or you select him for a few weeks and then he gets an injury affected 5. So any value you got in that first few weeks, you lose when he gets that 5, for example. And you look at his scores last year, he actually started fairly well. A few 40s in there, a couple of high 50, 3 high 50s before missing out on a few weeks, playing the large, pretty much last year was actually one of his better seasons. He missed 4 games in there between 4 to 6, 3 games between 4 to 6, and then missed a couple, 11 and 12, and then played the majority to the end of the year, and obviously getting injured there in the final. So he's coming off a bit of he's coming off foot surgery as well. So that's something to think about with him. Priced at 41, he's definitely undervalued, but will that be enough to turn him into a keeper? I personally don't think so. 496 is a nice price though. So yeah, priced at that 40. He needs to average over 50 for it to be worth it. I can see him doing it for a certain amount of time before having a few quiet ones or getting injured. So someone to pick at your own peril, but you're picking up a guy who's in a fullback in a really strong team, so there's every chance that he can do it. He's owned by 1.88%, so there's going to be a bunch of guys that are going to pick him up for sure. And I wouldn't be against anyone that would like to. That's for sure. So we move on to someone like Stephen Crichton. And for me, at 350k, where you've got to think of him as you picked him up as almost a rookie baseman price in his first year. So when he did that in 2020, you see the amount of tries that he scored. He actually almost set a record. He's almost scoring a try every game. And a lot of those times he's scoring a try or two, and he's scoring between that mid 30s to 45. Even with a second try there. There's one game where he actually dominated and got 4 line breaks for 74, but he's not someone that's going to be completely dominant in that centers, right? So you look at his tackle numbers here, and it's only a few games above 10, and then a bit of consistency in the back end of the year with sort of 12 to 14 being his standard there. So for me, if moving to the centers, you're hoping that his gameplay has improved, and you definitely saw some improvements last year. Playing in the fullback position, he obviously got to run the ball a little bit more. And in the centers, we'd be hoping for him to be averaging around that 140 meters and over 10 to 15, somewhere between 10 and 15 tackles each game at a base. And then you're looking at getting some attacking stats being in a really strong Panthers side. So for him at 350k, who's dual position in the center and wing fullback, priced at 28, I can definitely see some value. I can see him averaging somewhere in the mid-30s this year. And if someone that covers two positions and going to give you about 100k in value at a minimum, if he happens to take a leap in his third year, which is every chance, he actually is a really good player, then he could be, he could average a little bit higher and be priced a little bit higher. And I don't see him becoming a keeper. So for me, it's more just the dual position and getting him at a nice price. You're not breaking the bank to start him in your centers. And as we saw with guys like Momorowski last year, you own a center in a strong team. There's every chance that they get the try assist or the try. Like, he didn't actually score a lot of tries, Momorowski last year, but he'd always get that one run in open play where he'd make a line break and a few tackle breaks, possibly get a try or get an assist, and you're getting that mid-30s to 50 each week. So that's something that could happen with Crichton, and I'd suggest him as being a pretty solid buy at this stage, but you'd imagine him being on that left edge when you've got Luai, and if he can perform like he did especially for the bulk of that first part of the season last year, which I think he will. He's obviously got pretty tired across the season. He played Origin. There's a lot going on. So having Dylan Edwards out the back to feed Crichton as well is even better. We move to Isaac Tago, and for him, he should be getting the right edge. We actually get him as an edge and a center combination, and priced at 27, just that slight bit below Crichton there. We're getting someone that has a little bit of ability. He spent a fair bit of time coming off the interchange bench and filling in on an edge or in the centers and just playing where he needed to across the last bunch of games in the season. Obviously debuted in round 13. And sorry for the lack of videos last week, guys. I am coming off COVID, hence the cough. Was all good though. So you look at a game here, 36 minutes off the bench, run for 100 meters, got 6 tackle breaks. So he's obviously fairly damaging when he gets a little bit of time. Got a tackle break in one of the others and 4 in his 52-minute effort there. Playing on an edge, not something that you expect too much, but he definitely had a little bit of ability there. If we're looking at his tackle to miss tackle ratio, really, really strong. He only missed 3 tackles for the season. So this is great looking for him to move into the centers, because spending more time in the centers, you'll expect a little bit more of a missed tackle ratio than you would in an edge, because you usually have a couple of blokes either side where you can get exposed in the centers out there. So just keep that in mind. But overall, it's really good signs for him that his missed tackle to tackle ratio is really, really good. For me, if you're looking to pick him up, priced at 27, much more chance of scoring tries. He only had that one game with a try last year in that center position. I'd look for him to probably not score as well as a Momorowski, but Momorowski would have made 200k from this point onwards. So for me, somewhere priced between the 35 to 38, I think is really realistic for Tago, and you're getting him as a dual position, edge and center. So we don't know enough about him at this stage, but I'd definitely be looking into the trials for more information on him. Okay. With the Souths, we move on to a very interesting situation where we got Taff and Ilias, so Lachlan Ilias there. Taft's going to get the fullback position for the first few weeks while Latrell's out. Ilias should start in the 7 role. The question being, Taft played really well the back end of last year. Obviously was at fullback, but he's a natural half. So does he get moved back to the 7 position? Does Ilias play well and keep it? Obviously, their Souths are going to be a pretty strong side. So there's every chance that if he comes out and plays half decent, that he'll remain in that space. So I think Taft is currently the one that's a little bit more risky. He could come out and score a couple of good scores the first few games at fullback. I can see that definitely happening as he played so well in the lead up to in the final series for them. Has his talent for sure. What I say is, if there's an injury to any of them, then you can just move to the other. I think Ilias is a little bit safer. Only did play the one game last year, and it wasn't anything to write home about. He did miss a few tackles, if I'm correct. Just let me check. So 20 tackles in the half position, which is great. We can't complain with that. Played the 73 minutes, 20 tackles, but 5 missed tackles. So that's something to keep an eye on. He had the 1 error, ran for 78 meters, which is awesome in his first game. If we can see that more often, get the odd tackle break, the odd offload, and maybe the odd, if we give him a small percentage on try success rate, kicked for 178 meters. I'd expect something similar to that, around that 200 mark, playing next to a Cody Walker. And did score a try in that 31-point effort. But with 12 points in demerits, I could see him averaging somewhere in the mid-30s to 40 as on a on a safe basis. So that would give you an extra 150 to 200k in price rises, and a fairly safe option for a guy 300k. If you're hoping for a mid-30s price for scoring for him, then you can almost start him in your halves or play him as a reserve on the bench. So that's for Ilias there. Tafters, not too much to talk about in terms of. I don't think he's going to be getting that first crack at number 7. Should play well in the number 1 position, and we'll work it out from there. But he has that wing fullback and half dual, so if there's an injury, he'd be awesome to pick up along the way. And just the last one, we do have a centre spot that's open. We should have a rookie in there. There's a couple of guys vying for that spot, which we'll find out further as we get into the trials. But something to think about with centres, wingers, especially coming into this season, is you want to be picking up the basement guys. If we're not exactly sure how they're going to go in the NRL. Obviously, it's very hit and miss with the centres and wing fullbacks. Much more chance of doing well if they're playing for a good team. And with South being I'd say probably a top 6 team this year without Reynolds, then I'd suggest that a winger or a centre especially is going to be a little bit better, just a little bit safer with their points than a wing fullbacks can be. Then they're not a bad one to pop into your onto your bench. So you'd be trying not to play them, but hopefully a little chance to make some money at a cheap price. So that's the South. Move on to the Warriors to finish it off. And there's a few guys we want to talk about in here. Joshi Curran to start. You got that middle and that edge dual at 675k. The price point for me is a little bit rich. So I'm assuming he's going to start really well. There's no reason why he wouldn't. He's very much a good PPM kind of type player, whether he's on the edge or through the middle. And it looks like he'll get his chance through the middle while Tohu Harris is out. So that's something to think about with Joshi. The dual's really nice. He's going to score well, 675k. If he's about that 575 to 600, I'd say you'll be able to get a little bit of value out of him at the start, about 100k in value and keeper level scores. But for me, a 675, I just think there's a few better options around the 600k mark. Or you could pick up someone like a TPJ at the same price with still the dual. It has a little bit more upside in terms of the offloading, for example. And an increase in minutes. Whereas that price for Curran is pretty much based on the same amount of minutes that he's going to get and the same role that he played last year. So just think about that. We're looking for value at this point of the year, unless you're picking a top gun like a Payne Haas, for example. That's what I'd go with there. Shawnee Johnson at 544k. My issue is the price points. It's a little bit lower than obviously it was last year. When he was scoring around that 50 average, he did get injured. He's coming off the back of a pretty bad injury. So the worry for him is a new team. He pretty much had run of the team last year with the Sharks. You saw him playing with Moylan for a lot of it. So he had to do a lot of the kicking in general play. Will he get that as much playing next to a Chanel or whoever he's going to get in the Warriors team? I just don't see there being enough value because he's not going to be a keeper by the end of the year. I would not suggest. He's getting a bit older. He's coming off an injury. There's a lot of things to think about. They have a lot of weapons with Reece Walsh. So whichever other half is going to be. And a few really good sort of edge forwards with Curran and Aiken going to be playing there, for example. I just see better value elsewhere, especially when you're looking in that half position where there's you got the top guns in a Cleary. If you're going to start with that, you've got some cheaper guys with Ilias and you can play Matt Burton. There's so many other guys around that price point that I think have more upside than Johnson. Move on to Aiken, and he's someone I'm pretty high on at this stage of the season, and for good reason. You're getting a guy that you could pop into your centres, or you could play him on the edge at 540k. He's probably a little bit undervalued. Definitely, if we're thinking he can average somewhere in the high 40s to mid 50s, if we're thinking like a 48 to 55 kind of spread there for him. He's 135k cheaper than Curran, and you can play him in that center point or the edge position. And I just feel like for Aiken, he's already said himself that he'll be playing in the back row. Did really well in that position last year. The Warriors should be fairly decent this year, so I'd give him an opportunity to score a few more tries like he did last year. And I just think he provides some safety and a little bit of value in that center position. So he's almost a no-brainer if you have enough money to pop him in there. But the other thing is there's a bunch of guys, as we said, Tago, Crichton, Penasini, all those types of guys that you could pop into your centers. So see how he fits your squad, but I think he's going to be a pretty solid option. And lastly on this list is going to be Rocco Berry. So as a center and wing fullback, Jewel, we obviously get that versatility, which is going to be great this year with a lot of COVID protocol and things going to be happening there. At 358k for me, he's obviously that slight bit more expensive than the other guys, and I just think they're probably better options than Rocco at the moment in better teams. With if you go on Penasini with the Eels, you got the potential centre for the South, whoever that's going to be. You then also have the centres for Panthers, who are also going to be a better team. So think of that when you're looking at Rocco. We'll look at his scoring as well. And just a couple of things that are really interesting to me is the last few games he had two really big outlier games in terms of tackles, which had bumped his scoring up as well. So we'll let that load in a second. But yeah, for me, like it was a 26 tackle game in there, maybe a 28 as well, or 30, no, maybe just over 30. Let's just check it rather than guessing, Jamie. 26 and a 31, yeah, so I was right there in tackles. And for me, his meters gained is the one to worry about. One game over 100, and that was when he scored a try. All the other games that just weren't high enough for me. And for someone that's already priced in that sort of 29 range, he's going to have to average close to 40 for us to be, for it to be worthwhile to bring into the side. Yes, the dual position helps, but if you look at all the games where he didn't score a try, he's got a 20, a 15, a -1 in 34 minutes, which wasn't ideal. And then you've got a 34. He did score a 48, which is a really nice game. 3 tackle breaks and 4 offloads to go along with that 26 tackles. So I'd be calling that an outlier game compared to his others. He did show a little bit of promise. Like he looked like a guy that had a fair bit of talent, but we've said that before with other types of players. Like we've seen some really good games from someone like Conrad Hurrell, and then he's had some really poor ones in amongst that as well. So I'd just be keeping that in mind for someone, Warriors team that isn't going to be amazing. They might be close to a bottom 8 sort of team. But for me, the scores are okay when you're needing him to score in the mid-30s to 40s. I can see some better options elsewhere. But if you like him, if you think he's going to have a breakout season, I'm not going to push you away. But he's someone that I'd be watching early personally. There's a chance you get him even cheaper after a couple of weeks if you happen to have an injury in that, the wing fullback or the center position. And if he does well, then we can, and he's turned into like that keeper level player, then we can just jump on him. You haven't missed out on too much. Like if you're getting him at 390 or 400k and he's actually a keeper player, then you haven't missed out on much anyway. So that's the last 4 teams, guys. What we'll be doing following this is probably jump in and have a little play around with like setting up a bit of a team. And what you'd be looking to do when you're setting up that side with this year. We'll pop in actually this year's players rather than just analysing my round 1 team from last year. I think that'll be a good little one to go through. And then we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into all of the makeups of each team and how that's going to fit fantasy this year. And obviously, a little bit more to do on each of the players in each of the teams before we go into a bit of a positional analysis as we get closer to trials and things like that. But that's where we're at the moment. Obviously, it's almost Australia Day here. So still a fair while before the season starts. So good luck making your teams, guys. I really appreciate all of you guys tuning in. And if you are new to the channel or you aren't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate if you do, as the videos are going to start ramping up. And you get that notification bell as well. That's really appreciate that. And we'll catch you in the next bunch of videos, guys. Hope you have a great day. See you later.